Okay, let's jump right in. Imagine this scenario.
Yeah.
You're 16, right? And you pour everything into like a trillion-dollar business plan for e-commerce, which is super ambitious,
Yeah.
only to find out, the hard way that just having the idea, it's not quite enough.
Right. That's a tough lesson early on.
Or picture this, it's the early 2000s, phones are different, and you figure out a really clever fix for a common problem, maybe about phone credit.
Uh-huh.
And then you see a massive company roll out your exact idea, totally uncredited.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe fast forward a few years. You've built a successful company, really from the ground up, and then a global pandemic hits.
Uh-huh.
And you find yourself leading this huge effort to help like 1,000 stranded people get home while your own businesses are struggling.
Yeah, these are definitely some vivid snapshots, and they're all drawn from the sources we've got in front of us today.
They are. And we've got a pretty interesting set here. What have we got?
Well, there's a detailed CV, a personal narrative he wrote called Story of Bhaskara, and also a report diving deep into the solar industry context.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is basically to trace the remarkable journey of one person, Avash Bhatti. These sources together, they paint this picture of an entrepreneur who just seems to embody resilience,
Absolutely. Resilience, adaptability, this constant drive to solve problems. It feels like he's constantly reinventing himself across really different worlds, too.
Totally different world.
It's a story that it takes us from those really raw early ideas and, frankly, some pretty big setbacks.
Yeah.
Through building a serious player in the solar industry, then facing just massive disruption, pivoting into, the wild world of Web3.
Right.
And then kind of circling back, using everything he learned to tackle those original problems in energy, but with a totally new tech angle.
It's quite a ride. So let's rewind back to the beginning, those early sparks. The narrative starts when he's just 16, in 2002.
Yeah, 16. And he writes this, as you said, incredibly ambitious trillion-dollar business plan.
And what was the actual focus?
Grocery e-commerce. Specifically, delivering straight from the manufacturer to the consumer. He saw the potential for web stuff in India even way back then.
And he didn't just keep it in a drawer, did he?
No way. The sources say he actually mailed it out to VCs in Europe and the U.S.
Wow. That's some serious initiative for a 16-year-old.
Definitely.
But it came with a pretty quick, maybe harsh lesson.
It did. The lack of response basically taught him that a great idea, even one you think is worth $1 trillion, isn't enough by itself. Not for VCs anyway. An idea is just the start.
A really fundamental lesson. Painful, but fundamental. But he didn't seem to stay down for long. He kept looking around for problems.
Exactly. And he found one. Something super common and annoying in India back then with feature phones. Remember when incoming calls cost money?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. So if your balance was zero.
You couldn't even get a call, let alone make one.
Right. Which, like he thought, could be really bad in an emergency. Stuck somewhere, no balance.
Yeah, falling into a ditch, he mentions. Dark, no balance, can't call for help. He saw this really practical need for just a tiny bit of credit. Enough for one quick call.
Okay, so this specific problem, needing a tiny phone credit loan, like an emergency microloan, how did he picture it working?
Well, he researched it and came up with a pretty simple system, actually. You'd send an SMS, with a keyword credit or loan, if your balance was low. The operator, say Vodafone, their server checks the balance, sees it's low, and automatically gives you a small loan, maybe 10 rupees. Just enough.
And then you pay it back when you top up.
Exactly. Deducted next time you recharge, maybe with a tiny fee or something.
Makes total sense for the tech back then. And he pitched this to Vodafone.
Yes. The narrative says he traveled to Chennai, to their corporate office, to propose it. And this trip itself, it shows his grit. He was living on just 500 rupees a month. Got thrown out of a hostel even.
Wow.
Just getting to that meeting took incredible effort.
Unbelievable. The resilience is already there. So, how did the pitch go?
Well, he pitched it. Maybe it wasn't the most polished guy, but he had a clear problem, a clear solution. He left, hoping,
And then the source describes a moment later, a really buff one.
Yeah, it does. Some time passes. He's back in Chennai, struggling, basically broke. And he sees these huge billboards everywhere advertising Vodafone's Chinna Credit.
Which was, don't tell me.
Pretty much the exact same microcredit service he pitched them. Rolled out, advertised everywhere. No mention of him, no compensation.
Oh, man. That's like a punch to the gut.
Yeah.
Seeing your idea just taken.
Must have felt like a huge betrayal, yeah.
So did he just, let it go?
No, not at first. The sources say he tried to fight it, went back to the office, looked for legal advice. He felt it was theft, basically.
Makes sense. And what did the legal folks say?
Well, the advice was maybe blunt but practical, trying to sue a giant like Vodafone with their lawyers and resources. It was probably impossible for him, financially ruinous. The advice was tough. Just get over it. Put that energy into your next big idea.
Ouch. That's a really bitter pill to swallow. But it sounds like eventually he took that advice.
He did. Instead of getting stuck on it, he shifted gears completely. Started focusing on a different, huge problem. Pollution from power generation.
Okay, big shift. And the narrative points to something specific that pushed him that way.
Yeah, watching Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, that apparently really solidified things for him. It wasn't just about pollution, it was climate change. And he got really passionate about empowering people, even in remote places, to generate their own clean power, even just starting with one solar panel.
And that passion led him into solar. Starting Body Energy. The sources say it started really small, right?
Oh, absolutely. From 2006 to 2014, it was just a proprietorship, doing small stuff, solar streetlights, water pumps for villages.
Yeah.
And the narrative has this powerful line, says he grew from living on roads to running a company in that time, directly linking that personal struggle to building the business.
That says so much. So it wasn't just business. It was survival and vision combined. And then the company really started to scale up.
Yeah, from 2014 to 2021, Betty Energy became a private limited company. They went beyond just installing little things to being a full EPC provider.
Okay, EPC.
Right.
For listeners maybe not in the industry, what's that?
Right. It's engineering, procurement, and construction. So basically, they handle the whole process for bigger solar projects, designing it, buying all the parts, actually building it.
Got it. A much bigger deal. And the growth numbers seem pretty impressive.
They are. The CV mentions the team grew to 36 people in 4 years. They were doing multi-megawatt projects worth over $1 million each.
Wow.
And they even went international, opened a branch in Estonia, Body Energy U in 2019.
And landed some big international projects, like cyclone-proof designs and a huge one in Bulgaria.
Yeah, exactly. Designing special structures, handling a big 25-megawatt project in Bulgaria that was valued at $14 million. But as the company grew, handling these bigger, more complicated projects, he started noticing problems. Inefficiencies, not just with the hardware, but with the process.
The software side, as the narrative calls it.
Precisely. Things like project management tools were all fragmented, financial info was scattered everywhere, lots of tedious manual work slowing things down. And really frustratingly, he saw good projects just die on the vine at the concept stage because actually doing them, navigating all that mess, was just too hard.
So the panels are getting cheaper, demand is up, but actually getting a solar project built was still clunky.
Inefficient. It was actually slowing down the clean energy shift he cared about. So this led him to think about a solution, a platform to automate the whole solar project life cycle.
And that became Narinko.
Correct. Narinko Oy, registered in Estonia in 2017. He picked Estonia partly because, it's famous for being digital first.
Right.
And he was seeing similar problems in Europe, too. He called it building his next child there, in a place that got digital solutions.
And Narinko started out bootstrapped, funded by Body Energy's success.
Yeah, but just as he was getting this going, well, the world changed.
2020, the pandemic.
Yeah, COVID-19 hit, lockdowns, businesses stopped, supply chains broke, solar projects just stalled everywhere, and he was actually on a business trip in Germany when it all went down. Got stuck there.
Wow, what a nightmare, personally and professionally. But the sources say he did something pretty amazing while he was stranded.
Yeah, even in his own crisis, that problem-solving thing kicked in. But on a human level, he connected with other Indians stuck in Germany, formed a group, acted as their representative, held virtual meetings directly with India's Ministry of External Affairs.
Wow, stepping up.
Even helped organize a media campaign to raise awareness. And the material suggests this effort genuinely helped speed up the arrangement of repatriation flights.
That's real leadership, taking initiative in a crisis, focusing on others.
It really is, which makes what happened next even tougher. The pandemic's economic fallout was brutal.
Body Energy Private Limited had to close.
In 2021, yes. And Narinko Oy followed in 2022. The sources mention nearly 2 years with basically no income for him.
After all that building.
Yeah.
That's a massive blow.
Absolutely devastating. But again, that resilience kicks in.
What did he do?
An intense job search. The CV excerpt mentions applying for over 2,500 jobs.
Oh, 2,500. Wow.
But simultaneously, he pivoted again, leveraged his network, his adaptability, and moved into the Web3 space, which was really taking off.
Right.
Joined Solid World DAO, that's a decentralized autonomous organization, as community manager in early 2022. Got impressive results, tripled their Discord and LinkedIn numbers.
Is finding success in a new field.
Yeah, and then similar success at another Web3 project, Declimate, boosting their community engagement too.
And he co-founded something called the MRV Foundation.
Right. Focused on measurement, reporting, verification in that decentralized context. Raised $45,000 through Gitcoin grants.
Shows he could still attract support for new ideas, even after those setbacks.
Definitely. And his current advisory role with Carbify.io on a potentially huge NYSE-linked partnership, it just shows continued adaptability, working at the edge of new tech and climate solutions.
But even with all this new stuff, that original solar problem, it was still there.
The sources make that very clear. Solving those deep inefficiencies in solar, reviving that Norinco vision, it was unfinished business, a real burning passion.
You couldn't let it go.
Exactly. And then, around 2023, things started clicking technologically.
Advancements in IoT, Internet of Things, and AI.
Right. They reached a point where they offered a practical foundation for a new, more powerful approach, a way to pivot the original Norinco concept.
And that's Bhaskara.
That's the birth of Bhaskara, the culmination of all that experience plus leveraging these new technologies. An integrated IoT device and an advanced SaaS platform.
Designed to really automate and, well, revolutionize how solar projects get done under a new brand.
So what's the big vision for Bhaskara? What's it trying to achieve?
The overarching goal, based on the materials, is tackling those inefficiencies head-on, stop the lost revenue from plants not working optimally, and ultimately speed up the move away from fossil fuels.
Becoming the go-to platform globally.
That's the ambition. The leading platform to automate solar deployment, make clean energy accessible, efficient, and crucially, more profitable. This ties directly into hitting those big global targets, like 7 terawatts of solar by 2030.
A massive amount of power.
Huge.
And the specific solutions Bhaskara offers, the sources list things like automated performance prediction.
Yep. Automated planning and EPC support, full solar lifecycle management, even automating parts of the approvals and permissions process.
What gives it an edge?
It really stems from Bhavesh's experience. It's holistic end-to-end, from validating the initial design concept right through to running the plant, the O&M.
Unlike fragmented tools?
Exactly. It uses data-driven optimization with that integrated IoT and AI. It's built to scale small rooftop or massive solar farm. And the big one, significant cost savings by fixing those real-world inefficiencies he saw.
Okay, let's dive deeper into the core of it, that IoT device. Forget the components. What does it actually do for someone using it?
This is where it gets really practical and honestly quite cool. Imagine you're thinking about building a new solar plant. You take this Bhaskara device, put it on the potential site. The sources describe it as almost like a magic mirror.
Showing the site's true solar potential.
Exactly. It gives you real-time, on-site ground truths, actual measured data from that specific location.
So not just relying on satellite data or models.
Right. This tells you what's actually happening there. That data lets you quickly get a much more accurate idea of the potential ROI, the energy generation you can realistically expect.
That seems incredibly valuable upfront.
It is. And for the EPCs, the companies building the plants or the system integrators, it's a game changer for sales.
How so?
Because they can show potential clients hard data about their site's potential early on. It builds confidence, validates the project. The sources claim it can cut customer acquisition cost TAC by 90%.
90%. That's huge.
Makes selling fun, as one source puts it, because you're demonstrating value with real data, not just pitching.
Okay, cutting sales costs by 90% is massive. But what about all the solar plants already built? There are millions of panels out there. What does Bhaskara do for existing owners?
This is arguably even bigger in terms of ongoing value. The claim is significant, saving existing solar PV plant owners more than 50% on their operations and maintenance O&M costs.
50% reduction in O&M. How?
It comes down to making O&M much, much smarter and more targeted. First, it drastically cuts down unnecessary site visits.
By how much?
By 90%, according to the material. Teams only need to go out when the system flags a specific, actionable issue. No more routine scheduled visits just because.
Saves time, travel costs.
Exactly. Same principle for drone inspections. They're useful but costly. Bhaskara tells you where and when a drone might be needed, based on performance dips, reducing drone flying hours by a claimed 90%.
So targeted inspections, not blanket surveys.
Right. And overall, the system's ability to pinpoint issues means fault detection is apparently 10 times faster and more accurate.
How does it get that specific?
Through the granularity. You deploy a grid of these devices across the plant. Each one is a sensor giving hyperlocal data.
Like a fine mesh net of sensors.
Kind of, yeah. And that enables powerful analytics, like creating a dynamic soiling map.
Showing where the panels are dirtiest.
Precisely. Not just guessing, but seeing which specific areas or rows are most impacted by dust or dirt. So you can schedule cleaning campaigns based on actual need and likely yield improvement, not just a fixed schedule. Optimizes cost and energy output.
Since what else?
Pinpointing faults. Imagine one device is underperforming, but the ones right next to it getting the same sun and wind are fine.
Tells you the problem is local to that device's area.
Exactly. It's likely a faulty panel, a loose wire, maybe a microinverter issue right there. It massively cuts down diagnostic time compared to hunting across a whole section.
Instead of wondering if it's clouds or a bigger issue?
Right. You even get microclimate monitoring, detecting subtle differences in temperature or wind across the plant, which affect performance and long-term degradation.
And this data isn't just collected, it triggers action.
Yes, that's key. It feeds an automated alerting system. It sends specific, actionable alerts.
Like what?
Things like a performance deviation alert, if one device is, say, 15% lower than its neighbors, or a soiling threshold alert suggesting cleaning is needed in Zone C, maybe a wind safety alert, or just a communication loss alert if a device stops reporting. It tells the O&M team what's wrong and where.
That seems incredibly useful for managing large plants efficiently. How does it fit in with existing systems? Does it replace the monitoring systems plants already have?
No, and that's important. It augments them. It doesn't replace the data coming from inverters or the main SCADA control system.
SCADA is the supervisory control and data acquisition system.
Right, the plant's central brain. Bhaskara adds another layer, independent, ground-level, high-resolution data.
And how it integrates depends on the plant size.
It scales. For small systems, maybe up to 100 kilowatts, a device or two can act as an independent check, giving detailed performance ratio analysis, spotting degradation or soiling that basic monitoring might miss.
Okay. And for bigger plants?
Medium size, say 100 kilowatt to 1 megawatt, you'd use a grid of devices. Their data feeds into the existing SCADA system via an API, enhancing the diagnostics, enabling that soiling map we talked about.
And for the really large ones, 1 megawatt plus.
You'd use a higher density grid. This creates what they call a high-fidelity digital twin of the plant, a virtual model running on real-time data.
Deeply integrated.
Very deeply. Integrated with SCADA, with predictive maintenance platforms, alerts can automatically generate work orders, and crucially, this verified independent on-site data can be used for things like power purchase agreement reporting.
Adds transparency and trust to performance claims.
Exactly.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture, connecting these features to the current solar market, what's the real potential here?
Well, the timing seems spot on. The market is just exploding, as we said. Over 2.2 terawatts installed globally by end of 2024. 600 gigawatts added in 1 year.
Solar was 81% of all new renewables.
Staggering growth. And the economics are driving it, cost plummeting, massive investment pouring in, $450 billion expected in 2025.
So the industry needs efficiency.
Desperately. To handle this scale, to meet the urgency of the energy transition, they have to deploy faster, manage better, ensure reliability. Bhaskara's promise, automating, optimizing, using data, seems tailor-made for this moment. It addresses the internal friction slowing things down.
Right. So recapping the edge, it's that holistic, data-driven approach tackling inefficiency, lost revenue, the stuff holding back even faster growth.
Correct. It comes from solving problems observed firsthand over years.
And the team. We mentioned Bhavesh Bhatti, the visionary with the deep experience. Who else is involved?
The sources highlight two key people working alongside him. Prapti Pal, who focuses on the logic and algorithms for the SA side, the software brains, pretty much. And Kartik Suru, the technologist handling full-stack development, business intelligence, and critically, the IoT device development itself.
Seems like a good mix of skills for this kind of integrated hardware-software play.
It looks complementary, yes.
What about their growth plans? Sounds ambitious.
Definitely. They mentioned having interest already from developers covering over 1,000 megawatts of projects in India. The roadmap involves getting the minimum viable product MVP out, securing patents.
Seeking funding.
Yes, mentioning things like the ECI Accelerator grant to fuel ongoing tech upgrades. then scaling globally through partners, integrating with other industry platforms, and aiming for a big launch, maybe Intersolar Europe 2026.
Okay, for our listeners thinking about this from an investment standpoint, what do the sources say about the financials, the business model?
The model is annual recurring revenue, ARR, based on a subscription per device deployed.
And the price point mentioned?
€199 per device per year.
Okay. And the cost of the device itself?
The unit economics look pretty strong. They estimate the comprehensive cost of goods deployed secured at €49 per device.
Which gives them
a very healthy gross margin, over 75% per unit on that subscription revenue.
So the key for investors is linking that margin back to the value for the customer.
Absolutely. Those big savings promise to plan owners the 50% reduction in O&M costs, that 90% cut in customer acquisition cost. That's the value proposition. If Bhaskara delivers that, customers get a clear ROI, which drives adoption and sustains that recurring revenue.
Makes sense. The sources also mentioned blockchain.
Yeah, as a future potential. Things like creating immutable data trails for audits or carbon credits, maybe tokenizing renewable energy certificates, enabling peer-to-peer energy trading, even automating maintenance payments based on verified data.
Adding layers of trust and new business models down the line.
Exactly. It points towards a vision of really automating the whole solar revolution at scale.
And they are actively looking for partners and investors now.
That's what the material indicates, yes.
Yeah.
Accelerate that plan.
Do the sources give specific investment details for this round?
They do. A pre-money valuation set at $20 million, and they're seeking between $250,000 and $2 million in this round.
For what kind of equity?
That investment range corresponds to a 20% equity dilution in total for this round. Provides concrete numbers for potential investors.
So let's bring it all back. We started with the story of resilience, that early crushing disappointment with the Vodafone idea.
Seeing his idea just taken.
Then navigating those deep systemic inefficiencies he found while building Buddy Energy.
Living the problems he now aims to solve.
Leading that effort for stranded people during the COVID crisis, a real moment of leadership.
Absolutely, under immense personal pressure too.
And then constantly adapting, pivoting through Web3 ventures after his own businesses faced closure. Bhavesh Bhatti's journey really is a powerful example of persistence.
It is. And Bhaskara feels like the direct result of all that accumulated experience, both the successes and the major challenges. It's not just tech for tech's sake.
It's built to solve real, costly problems.
Problems Bhavesh and his team encountered firsthand in this exploding solar market, using new tools like IoT and AI to drive the efficiency and profitability that the energy transition desperately needs.
So, a final thought for you, the listener. Think about the sheer scale of solar we need by 2030, those terawatt targets. How absolutely vital will automation and data-driven efficiency become to actually hit those numbers?
And what's the potential if a solution like Bhaskara can truly unlock that efficiency, making clean energy deployment faster, cheaper, more reliable on a global scale?
What stands out most to you about this story, this technology, and its potential impact?